panellists. Now, I'm going to start with you because you asked the first question and it kind of started quite a spirited conversation about the spirit of Qantas. Is that spirit dying? How do you feel about Qantas?
Personally, the question I asked, Australian taxpayers are going to be footing the bill for this JobKeeper subsidies that Qantas were paying. Yet Qantas has kind of screwed our people over. They've booked people for flights that were cancelled weeks ago. I don't think these people should be paying for their losses during the pandemic. If you want support from the Australian community, I don't think you should be treating the Australian community in the way that they are. People should be booking for flights and not having them cancelled weeks in advance.
So a lot of the answers, correct me if I'm wrong, were basically, well, that's done and dusted, the JobKeeper. Do you think that's a satisfactory answer?
Definitely not. I think moving forward, the government has paid all this money to a private organisation. I don't think we should just let them keep that money and just walk away with it.
But the problem is they did get it lawfully, right? So what do you do?
I think there's always room for law reform. I don't think we should just sit there and kind of say, oh, we've done this in the past and we should kind of just move on with it. We've made a mistake. I think there's definitely room for law reform and to change the path that we move forward towards.
Now, I'm also interested in how that discussion on The Voice went. I thought it was really interesting to hear from particularly those young First Nations people on our panel, and I'm coming to you because you asked that great question of Vanessa. She kind of revealed really that she's sitting on the fence, and then all of a sudden Darcy, who was a yes, was sitting on the fence. It was rather confusing. Everyone was moving around. As a student, how are you viewing this debate?
Well, after hearing what they had to say, I then came up in my head, well, do they think that, like, if it goes through, it will create more of a divide between the nation and non-Indigenous people and Indigenous people? Because I wanted to know how Indigenous people look at this, like, in amongst their communities, how they are coping with it and what they want to vote, like yes or no, and their reasons why. Because everything, like talking to my parents and my family, they only believe what they hear online or what gets sent in the mail. They don't actually have a personal opinion. And I'd like to know how people that it's going to affect the most view it.
And what are people saying in your own life?
Like yes or no. Well, half of my family was saying yes and half was saying no, but for totally different reasons. And my sister, who is voting, who's younger, was doing it off what's going to affect her and not affect the other people, which was interesting to see because she is younger. And things.
How did she think it was going to affect her?
It was something to do with tax. I was just listening. Something about that. I was just there. It's a discussion, but it was something about that.
I'm always interested in the messages people have heard and why they might be thinking a certain way, right? Because we keep hearing there's a lot of misinformation, and there is. There's a lot of stuff online which is just inaccurate, and we're trying to get accurate. How did you view tonight? Have any of your... Look, I'm just targeting you. I know you've asked a question at Q&A before. I know you know how to talk on the microphone. Any of your opinions changed listening to the panel?
I think it's definitely interesting hearing all kind of perspectives, especially from Indigenous peoples. I think it was interesting hearing about, because I think we've heard a lot about, especially the Labor Party trying to appeal to older generations by saying, you know, it's just an advisory body, they don't have any power, which is true because they aren't going to be democratically elected, which does make sense. But I think in that same vein, with them trying to appeal to, and I'm just generalising with older generations, appealing with this kind of, they have no control, all this kind of stuff, it then kind of puts, as Vanessa was saying, Indigenous people into this perspective of, well, how is it going to help us if it has no power? I think the politicisation of this issue, which is shouldn't be politicised, it's kind of turned into like a two-party kind of political discussion. I think it shouldn't be in that way because it does affect actual people's lives.
The other big conversation we had tonight was industrial relations, workplace laws, because that's a huge issue this week, and the government's put forward these laws that clearly business, as you heard there, is not happy with. Put your hand up if you are really exercised. I'm looking for hands. If I don't see a hand soon, I'm not... Thank goodness there's a hand. How do you make of that conversation? I wonder if anyone's views were shifted at all or you were influenced at all. It seemed like pretty different views from Andrew and Jed Kearney, who I think are very much on different sides on this.
I was really interested that the question was, how old is too old to work? And as my own parents and people in my family have got into their 80s, the fact is they don't have the same capacity that they have. I'm in my 50s and I don't have the get up and go that I had 10 years ago. And there's not a chance in hell that I'll be teaching a bunch of 15-year-olds, or 18-year-olds in your case, when I'm 80 years old and like my parents. Like, they require assistance from us. And you just can't say, oh, let's leave it up to the individual and they can work as long as they want. And it's just unrealistic. Sorry, I'm getting oddly emotional about this because I'm seeing my own parents lose capacity and this kind of delusion that you can just keep charging on through life as if you're young and sprightly. It's just not how it works when you age.
But people are different. Some people's capacity is very different to someone else's, right?
Yeah, that is certainly true. But the question that was asked by somebody up the front about Mitch McConnell, that's somebody with diminished capacity. I think when your capacity diminishes, and I'm not saying we have to have a hard and fast age, but I'm increasingly aware that, as a rule, our capacity diminishes as we get older.
Is this person still a good teacher?
Very good teacher, yes.
So is his capacity diminishing?
Do I occasionally forget words?
All the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. The stuff that I reach for that I could just instantly recall in my 20s, I do. I get through, and Silent, by the way, is a wonderful student.
Right, and you're always, you're like, that's the word you're looking for, sir.
Oh, no, but Silent is good about what are you actually trying to say? So it is good young people do keep you on your toes, but I need to be kept on my toes because my toes are not as pointy as they used to be.
Oh, I love that. And look, you've got a ringing endorsement from your students, even if they're remembering words for you now. But, that's what they're there for. And just last, I'm coming to Shah, who asked that, don't worry, I'm going to not injure myself, don't worry. And everyone's like, oh, she's going to smash her head and then we're going to have a workplace injury case. And that will be a good topic for Q&A, won't it? No, I won't. I'll be like you, working forever. Were you happy with their answer?
I thought it was an interesting answer because they did actually say a lot needs to be done. There's a lot of opportunity to address this issue, and that guy up there's right. The issue needs to be addressed. It's how you address it, and how you pick up the nuances of capability versus loss of capability. And when you think about the AFR recently, they had a little story on how people lose their capacity to manage money as they grow older. So that would be a workforce issue if you still happen to be working in a shop, say. Mm.
Now, in your question, I read your background. I read everything. When we said at the start, we read everything, we really do. And you described yourself in a way that I loved. The word entrepreneur was in it. Can you tell everyone how you describe yourself?
Yes, I'm a seniorpreneur.
A seniorpreneur. What is a seniorpreneur?
Effectively, a mature, perhaps older entrepreneur going into business.
And tell us your backstory. When did you decide to go into business?
Well, it was sort of a COVID-based thing, actually, and thinking about what can I do, how hard it is to get a job. I'd already written before about workforce ageism and how women 50 plus, plenty of them here, love to have a job, can't get one, and how younger people are chosen over us because we don't fit the culture. And I think there was a time that I'd applied for over 1,000 jobs unsuccessfully, including being willing to move from Melbourne to Albany, Western Australia for a job with my dog, in the car across the Nullarbor. And I apparently wasn't a good fit for the organisation, but did have lots of skills.
Wow. And that's why you're a
seniorpreneur.
A seniorpreneur. And with that, my friends, we're going to go viral on TikTok. Thank you. This has been a great night.